Welcome to the Curiosity and Connection podcast. I'm your host, Na. Today I have a special guest. I guess this would be considered my inaugural episode as you recommended. My dear, more than 20-year friend, Feven. Except the role is going to be reversed. She's going to be the host and I'm going to be the guest. So fire away.
Yeah, the roles will be reversed because you've been interviewing a few people.
Yes.
So we decided that you need to be interviewed. How do you feel about this?
I'm totally cool about it. I don't know what I expect. It's interesting because I'm usually the person coming in with like a set of questions and people have some vague idea of what I'm going to ask. I mean, the first half of the interviews, I didn't have a set of guideline question until you recommended, but the later half, I had a set of questions. So when people asked for it, it helped. So I sent you the question, but at the same time, I don't know. So I'm just like, let's see where this goes.
Well, like you said, you and I have been friends for over 20 years, right? I feel like I know you. I know a lot about you. But I'm also very curious to learn more with the listeners, learn something new about you, because that's one thing you said too. When you interviewed people, you learned something new, even though you felt like you knew them very well.
I would say I did 9 interviews, and 4 of them I knew the person. 2 were my cousin. One was the mom, another friend, neighborhood mom, and another neighborhood mom I known. But the rest, I just like, I barely knew them, but I was grateful that they trust me to do this process. And again, it was going into like, I knew them, but I think what the interview has helped me understand is that I truly didn't know them. And I kind of like that because when you think you know someone, it goes back to what the intention of the podcast is, which is you stop being curious. You kind of like assume that is their entirety, that is their world, that's it. There's nothing else to discover when people are so complex and layered, and you've only known one part of them or what part of them they choose to reveal. But in that 1 hour was sitting with them and interviewing that topic, you get to know them on a different level that I didn't know, you know? So that was fascinating in that regard. And even the people who I barely knew, I got to know even more. So and I think they kind of got to know me in return because it wasn't a one-sided discussion. It was more like an exchange of conversation on both our parts.
Yeah. So that was part of the reason you started this podcast. And tell us a little bit more about the name that you chose, Curiosity and Connection.
Well, I think you were part of that journey. I think for as long as you've known me, I've always been, I guess, abnormally curious.
Yes.
I think when I wrote the memoir, I can honestly attest, looking back in hindsight, because I didn't know where the curiosity came from. I thought it was uniquely me, but I realized in reflecting on my life journey and doing the healing work that my curiosity came from both my parents, and they kind of nurtured it in their own way. But I think I'm more like my mom, but in a more heightened version. I've done the academia, but this is like real world, and there's so much knowledge out there, and everybody is just like an encyclopedia of knowledge.
So sorry, Nora's like tickling my
An encyclopedia of knowledge, and I'm just like, why would you not want to know them? But that's uniquely me, right? Because I know most people are like, I don't want to know you. You stay over there, right? Whereas I'm just like, tell me about yourself, right? And I think that in its own regard, that curiosity to want to know the person, especially in this community that's grown since COVID, like, how do I bridge that gap to navigate holding space for our differences? Can we discover some sort of similarities and work with that while we hold space for our difference at the same time? But also like, and getting to be curious about your journey or your interest. I've talked to someone else and I'm like, there's a similarity here, right? I was like, okay, like take for instance board game. I would say to him, I'm like, he also plays board games. Like, he does. Like, let's connect, you guys, because maybe you're in your own separate way, you're uncomfortable, but if I can bridge that gap to connect that, maybe that can be, I think maybe that's part of it. As we say, we're so divided around the world. Is there a way to bridge that gap, to connect those similarities while we hold space for differences.
And you've always played that role for as long as I can remember. You've
Yes.
always tried to bring people together.
I think it's part of growing up a middle child in a dysfunctional family and trying to maintain the peace and the complexity of. There's a similarity in that my parents and my sisters are a very strong personality, but they also have their unique difference. So how do I'm I'm hearing everybody's story and communication, but no one's hearing each other. So how do I reframe what this person's saying so that it lands with this other person? Like, hey, I think you guys are both speaking the same thing. Let's connect on that regard. So I don't know. I don't know. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does. Well, it was just around the title
Yeah.
of this podcast, right? And I think it does capture your intention very well.
Well, and also I think I was throwing a bunch of ideas at you, and I think I forgot what the original title was, but it was too lengthy. So just to keep it at 2 words, and I went with that. I like it. It was simplified enough that I'm like, I think this is gonna be it.
Yeah. Yeah. So tell me, what led you to this podcast?
Oh God.
And is it a passion? Because that's one of your questions, right? To your many guests.
I think I think prior to COVID, I heard the term podcast, but I never truly listened to podcasts. I was more of a tactile reader, a book reader. And I think it was during COVID, where it's like people would talk about, oh, listening to this podcast while they work. And I started to explore. My younger sister had sent me a podcast on the Vietnamese boat people, and I started listening to that. And I was like, okay, I can listen to this because it was interesting because it was part of my legacy as experiencing the Vietnamese boat people. And then I started exploring other podcasts and just their conversation. I'm like, wait, this sounds like the way I have conversed with a lot of the people I've known throughout my life. Like really interesting conversation, but also vulnerable conversation. And I think somewhere along the line later on, I thought, I can do that. You know what I mean? I can carry like that vulnerable conversation into a podcast setting. I just have to.
Because you've been having it in so many different spaces,
Yes.
right?
And it's just more like, can I convince these people that I've talked to trust me, and can I hold a safe space and provide a safe space for them to trust me to continue on that conversation on a public platform? And some were respectfully declined, and they have every right to. They're okay having a vulnerable conversation with me in private, but on a public platform, they weren't ready to go there. Whereas other like, yeah, let's do this, and I love that because it just kind of shows you that people will meet you where you're at, and others they will, but they'll do it in private, and that's okay too, and just respect those differences. Is it a passion? I can't honestly answer that yet, because I remember when I was finishing up the memoir and then I was doing the interviews, I remember saying to my partner, I said, I'm really enjoying doing the interviews and the podcast. He's like, more than the memoir. I felt like the memoir was a requirement just to tell a story, whereas this is like, I'm learning. I think because the memoir, I already know my history, so I'm just regurgitating the facts.
Yeah.
Hey. Whereas the interviews, it's like, I know you, but I'm learning more about you. So I always get excited when I'm learning more. It's like, it's that experience of, hey, being in a school setting again, where you're like, I can be forever a student, but in a life setting. And my partner's like, yeah, that's because you like talking to people. So this is like meeting you where you are at in a different format. So I can see why you like doing that.
But it was also feeding that curiosity that, is insatiable.
Yes.
And helping you build connections.
Yes. I don't know. Again, I can't definitively say it's a passion because it's something new.
Yeah.
I've always liked talking to people, but I can't say talking to people is a passion. It's just an interest. Maybe an interest is a type of passion. Are you done barking at us?